Let's sip on some bourbon. Let's talk a little baseball with Walker Buehler. I think this is a good little rhythm that we got going every week. New soon-to-be dad, Walker Buehler. Why don't we just lead with that? Are you excited? The little tube flap? What's going on, man?
No, I'm excited, man. End of January, I think everything will change, but no, we're looking forward to it. So, exciting times around here.
Yeah, I mean that's one of those things that I can't imagine what the feeling's like. I can't imagine how excited you are. And I was gonna ask, how are you sleep wise? Like, are you one of those guys that really needs his like 8 or 9 hours? Because I am, and I was just talking about it with my cousins. I have no idea how I'm gonna do it when the time comes.
I'm not that picky about the time. I used to sleep pretty hard. As I've gotten older, I've started getting up a lot earlier. It's very weird. I get up every day at like 6 now, which is a year ago that would have been so kind of abstract to me, but I guess I'm just getting a little bit older, so I think I'm a little more prepared for it now than I probably used to be.
So next 10 minutes, we're going to spend power ranking each of your Dodger teammates' kids. So who's your favorite kid in the Dodger clubhouse? Do you want to start bottom or top? Least favorite kid?
The Kershaws.
Okay. I do want to hit on Cody Bellinger before we get into what I know we had in the rundown, which is, best pitchers in baseball right now. I want to ID 3 or so guys in the American League that you have loved watching this year, 3 or so guys in the National League that you have loved watching. And then our video element is matchup of 2 of the better pitchers in the National League so far this year in Strider and Gallen. But Cody Bellinger from Codify, he ripped it off. The July numbers for Cody Bellinger since coming off the IL. This guy's hitting 452 with 7 pumps, 22 driven in 19 games. And he's got a 1270 OPS. You have seen so many different versions of Cody Bellinger. You have had a front row seat to every different version of Cody Bellinger. How happy does this version make you?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's super reminiscent of probably the first 3 months of 2019, his MVP year. So, I've seen Cody do this before. I think he was like around almost, I think it was 1,100, almost 1,200 OPS for a half that year. I don't know if we want to fact check that. It was pretty close. I think for a long time we were talking like, oh, he's hitting like 380. And so it's hard to – there's guys that are streaky where they have great weeks. Cody's one of those guys that has a great month or great 2 months or great 3 months. That are kind of otherworldly, I guess. And, for the Cubs and whoever he may end up with this deadline, I think a lot of people are probably banking on that he can carry it for another 2 months. But, it's not like he was struggling really at the beginning of the year too. He was playing well and seems to have found that next gear that other guys don't really have relative to him. And then I think the other thing that we don't talk about is like, even – with us the last couple of years where it wasn't quite the same MVP swing, like the guy's still a positive WAR player at like 3 or 4 different positions when he's not raking, right? When he's not even like hitting relatively close to himself. He could win. I think he could win a Gold Glove at 4 positions, which is not something that you can really say about a ton of people, especially guys that have hit 40 homers and OPS 1,000 and stuff like that.
Real quick, Aram, before you jump in, Cody Bellinger, 88 games before the break in 2019, hit 336 with an 1124 OPS, had 30 pumps. So he was like that good pre-break.
That was literally going to be my question is, we've seen kind of the rough patches of Bellinger where there's a lot of swing and miss, but then you see the stretches where he's absolutely automatic. You're seeing him hit for average and the power as well. What do you think makes him so good when he's going right and so difficult for pitchers to get out, given that, kind of the dichotomy of the 2 Bellingers we've seen?
Yeah. You can watch him when he's really, really good. It seems like he's so balanced because there's no backload, right? So he can kind of get the swing off whenever he wants. You'll see him hit breaking balls in heaters when he's going. When he struggles, it seems to be that he can really hit one of those at a time, which is most hitters in the major leagues, right?
Yeah.
But he's just so talented at contorting his body and being able to create power. Like we've seen him at 220 pounds. We've seen him at 190 pounds. Like he always has juice. The move that he makes is really a lot more similar to pitchers in the way that he's kind of straight up and then separates and creates power. It's just fun to watch when he's going, man. The swing's big and it looks so much long. It's not. It can get long on the back, but it's really not. He gets through into it pretty good, but it's so long out front. It's just a pretty swing, and kind of his look and he's a little goofy, and he hits a homer. He's running around with a big smile, and just one of those kids or one of those guys that really plays like a kid, but can do some grown man things on a baseball field that not many people can do. I mean, the catch he had for us in the World Series, or that run, a couple of big homers for us, and obviously we celebrated the one a little too hard and popped the shoulder, but he still played and did all those things after that as well. So tougher than you might give him credit for. And I remember in 19, the switch was like 2 strikes. He was hitting balls down the third baseline and getting doubles and stuff like that. And I think that's, everybody, we just had the draft and everybody talks the 5-tool thing, right? Like hit, run, power, defense, throw. Like Cody's all 5, and when the hit's going, everything else gets elevated, and he's an MVP kind of player.
7 years is a really long time, and the structure to get to free agency in Major League Baseball is like really tough, and you see some guys go through ebbs and flows, and I don't think there's a greater one that we've seen. My mind goes to Chris Bryant and that huge deal that he signed in Colorado, because that guy, he probably made himself $100 million in 2021. It was that good of a resurgent year. Bellinger, what's in the tank, but this guy's going to go from non-tendered to prove-it deal to signing a pretty hefty contract when, he opts out of this mutual option after this year. So, I mean, just seeing that and like knowing the pressure that he may have been putting on himself financially, like how impressive is actually coming through on like a prove-it year to you?
Yeah, I mean, it's huge. I think there's different levels of the guys that get non-tendered, right? Not that I was there at the time, but having spoken to Justin Turner about that situation, and then he eventually plays 2 great years and signs for whatever he signed for back in the day, and then now signed with Boston for a good chunk. Like, it's been done. I think it's very interesting to go MVP, ARB1 record, 17 million or whatever he made, and then do it. It's very, very easy to get complacent in the fact that guy's made 40, 50, $55 million playing baseball already. And now I have to go prove it. That's very, very difficult, right? We talk about, you and I were talking about the UFC and boxing and the old, it's hard to go run when you wake up in silk sheets thing, right? That's where he's at. He's got enough money for 4 generations of his family, right? But he goes to Chicago, of all places, a great place to play, but not a aloof fan base, right? Like a fan base that's pretty engaged, and just goes and does it. And it's cool to see, and obviously him being a buddy of mine, I'm extremely happy for him. But it's pretty wild that through those kind of trials, it's you can tell he wants to play good baseball and be a good baseball player, right? And I think most of us are like that until you get to a certain amount of income, and things can change in terms of what this whole thing's about, why you're in the gym, why you're doing X, Y, and Z. And I think it's a really cool story, and one that I hope people kind of run with, especially getting in the trade deadline, and hopefully we get to see him in October somewhere.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question is, when you're playing in a spot where you almost feel like you're playing for your next team in a way, with the Cubs kind of sliding. And we were talking about it before we hit record, like there's no shortage of suitors for Cody Bellinger. You mentioned he can win a Gold Glove at 4 spots or 5 spots, and he can swing it. He can fit into any single team. What do you think? I obviously haven't been in that position, but what do you think of the idea of kind of playing for an audition for other teams? That's got to be a pretty weird feeling as well. And a lot of guys end up doing that, whether they're veterans late in their career, like a Nelson Cruz, or younger guys that are just playing their way out of the situation that they started in.
I think it's going to be interesting. I think our trade for Trey and Scherzer as a package deal is going to serve as a pretty good barometer for what will happen with Stroman and Belly, because you've kind of got probably not the same acclaim in terms of career. Scherzer and Stroman's obviously been extremely successful, but he's not at the same point in his career that Max Scherzer was.
He's not a future Hall of Famer, right?
Right. I mean, you never know. And I think he's going to pitch for a long time and be really good. You never know. But like Scherzer was at the time, right? and the assumption is that Trey Turner, a year from when we got him, was going to make $300 million, right? So I think it's a similar profile in terms of top of the rotation guy and a dynamic position player, right? And seemingly the package that we sent to Washington has worked out pretty good for them as well. So with Ruiz and Kybert and Josiah making the All-Star team, and they've already extended Kybert. So I think it could be interesting to see if those guys go together or separate. And I have to assume that players of that caliber in that part of their career, like having a guy they've spent all spring with, logistics and doing all that stuff, like, and especially the rumor mill of it all too, right? Like at least they've got a guy that they can bounce like what they're hearing off of or what they want, whatever those conversations are like to kind of get at ease with. I probably am going to get traded. I got to think is beneficial in some way.
Those two guys open to play in October. We just watched two teams that will be playing in October unless Rome falls in Arlington this past weekend, which was Dodgers, Rangers. You guys hung 18 on Texas on Saturday. Holy hell. And then you had an early barn burner on Sunday as well. And those are two really good offenses.
Yep.
Dodgers look better, man. And I know it's a weekend sample and you can only take so much from that, but seeing two like heavyweights kind of go at it, what was your main takeaway from this weekend in Texas?
I mean, obviously the first game's kind of full go for everyone, but then Corey gets hurt in the first or second game, and I think that kind of changes the dynamic a little bit of it, at least for Texas. It's starting shortstop, $300 million player, and he hurts his thumb, and that kind of changes things, right? But I think the biggest thing out of Texas for me is just, they were paying 6 starting pitchers at the beginning of the year over $12 million. Whoever, John, the list goes on of guys, and and we saw Perez today, but outside of that, we didn't. I forget who started the first 2 games. I know Dunning threw one.
We got Dunning on Saturday.
Who
Friday.
threw the first game?
Was it John Gray on Friday?
No.
No?
Wasn't John Gray?
I think the point is that it wasn't Evaldi or DeGrom or
it was Heaney.
It's Heaney, right? So, you know what I mean? I think we had no Kershaw. We had it's just an interesting. It didn't line up to do everything that we probably wanted it to be out of that series. It definitely didn't line up like a playoff series would.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, I think, we have good memories in that ballpark, and I know a lot of guys like playing there. But yeah, I mean, it was a fun series. I think I wouldn't say any sort of rivalry series, but a super familiar series in that Woodward is back with us after managing there. I know I have a couple of buddies that went there from us, Josh Spores being one of them, Corey, obviously. And so it's kind of interesting in terms of all the ties with us and with that ballpark and with their team now, and Boch being the old Giants manager. And, I think outside of maybe the Yankees, they might be, if you're talking dream World Series matchups, like that would be kind of an interesting one for some reasons that were probably a little unexpected, I guess.
Yeah.
A lot of fans like to look, and baseball writers as well, like to look at certain matchups when we get to this part of the year as like a litmus test, right? Like this is this big team playing this really successful team, and let's see who wins the slugfest or the heavyweight bout. How much do players look at it in that perspective? I know in this instance, you talked about how not everybody had everybody, going for them in this one, but generally speaking, do you guys look at some of these series at this point in the year as a measuring stick, or do you kind of just play ball and kind of just pit yourselves against yourselves?
You know what? I think those matchups were a little rarer, at least in the interleague side, until this year. Right now, we play everyone every year, and so I think those things are going to become a little bit more common, which I think is great. But in years past, it's like you're only playing one division. What if it's not the division that has the big boy teams, right? Like, I know on what parks I've even been to, I've never pitched against the Yankees or been to Yankee Stadium. I pitched against the Blue Jays once, but I've never been to Toronto. Like, we've played the Red Sox. I don't think I've ever pitched against them in the regular season or at Fenway. I pitched against them in one game, I think, in the World Series. So now there's more of a chance that you're going to get to play these teams. You are going to play them every year, but there is going to be a little bit of that litmus test thing that you kind of know going into, even if you only play a team for 3 games, right? Like, you play them in August, it's not that far away, right? Like, to play them in September, October, November, right?
So, quick aside here, you mentioned you haven't thrown at Yankee Stadium or Fenway. I assume those are like top 2 on like I gotta do this list. Throw at Yankee Stadium, throw at Fenway Park, and if you keep going for long enough, you're gonna do it. What was like, I don't know, your holy shit, I'm actually pitching in this ballpark place?
I mean, I think for different reasons. Wrigley was one of them for me, just because I grew up semi-close, and then Cincinnati was an interesting experience for me just because I have so much family and stuff, not only in Lexington but in Cincinnati as well. So that was weird. I've never really thrown well there. I've gotten off to some good starts and then kind of crumble. I don't know why, but yeah,
it's a bandbox. We'll blame it on the park.
I mean, those 2 are probably were the weirdest ones for me. But I mean, to be honest with you, my first game was at Dodger Stadium. Like, looking up there is such a wild experience in terms of, even when you're throwing and stuff, you don't really get it, but you get on the mound and realize, like, this place is 4 decks. Like, there's nothing bigger than
Yeah,
that makes sense. Is there another park that you maybe didn't expect to hit you a little bit? I mean, I've been trying to go to all 30, and some impress me more than others, or some are like kind of just more encompassing than others. Was there one that you stepped on the mound or got out there before the game and you're like, whoa, this is a little bit more than I expected?
I mean, New Texas has a pretty wild feel to it, just with the dome and how big it feels in there. I think Dodger Stadium probably has that most. I mean, you think about how it's shaped, right? It's only the two kind of things in the outfield all the way across, and we still have one of the biggest stadiums in baseball. So that being said, how big the backside of that stadium is pretty crazy. No, I mean, I think it's kind of cool. You can see different parks, like, oh, I bet the same people designed this one that designed that one, right? Like, there's some that have a little bit of the same kind of chemistry to them, seemingly. Like, to me, San Diego and Washington are just kind of flipped. They have a big scoreboard in left in San Diego, the big one in right in Washington, kind of an open area or center field, and that they just have like these similar feels to them. Even in those 2 parks, like the walk down from the locker room to the field is a little similar. There's a lot of them. Philly, Washington, St. Louis all have essentially like the same walk, which is kind of an interesting one. I think probably the most underrated park in baseball is Pittsburgh would be a pretty popular answer among players. It's kind of a cool scenery.
Yeah.
But yeah, Milwaukee had a cool feel in the playoffs in 18.
That one's really cool. I love that part. That was one of the
there's a crazy, and should not be a negative thing in any way. There's a cool like bar pub smell in Milwaukee.
Yeah.
Like during big games with the dome, and it's like they're doing the sausages and stuff, but it's almost like people are smoking cigarettes in there. Like, it's got there's a cool feeling, and it was like kind of a dicey series, and we're playing game 6 and game 7 there. Like, that had like a little bit of something in the air,
the rough and tumble Wisconsin air getting in your nostrils.
I'm telling you, it's like there's fog in that dome, man. It's crazy.
You just kind of opened my third baseball eye right there with like ballpark architecture. Would you say San Diego and Washington are kind of flip-flopped?
I think so. I don't know if everyone would agree with me there. There's just some like similarity, and then you look at like concourses and how people are behind you and stuff. You get like similar feels in certain places.
I'm a sucker for architecture in general, with ballpark architecture too. So
yeah, like St. Louis to me feels so flat, and then it like gets high. And then there's other parks that are like right up on you really quick. St. Louis is the one that's probably like the most gradual feeling to me.
Got you. Okay.
Yeah, like Colorado is probably one of my favorite stadiums. I just wish it was at like 2,000 feet, not 5,200. But in terms of like the setup of the stadium and it's a beautiful, beautiful park.
Let's talk pitching here. And I want to start with the American League first because, we're kind of entering the award season. AL MVP feels all but, finished. NL MVP, like it's kind of Acuna's world right now, and you've got others that are contending, but the Cy Young races are tight right now, I think.
Yep.
And, like in your eyes, I guess, in, a pitcher's mind, who has been throwing the ball you feel like the best? Let's start with the American League. Who are some guys that you look at in the American League and say they are having incredible years and deserve Cy Young votes?
Yeah, I mean, in the AL, let me look. I'm trying to look at the numbers that I like to make sure I'm in a good spot here. Yeah, I mean, I think in the American League, obviously, Eovaldi is kind of having one of those special years. He's 11-3, 125 innings at a 2.7. Cole, I think we kind of expected. McClanahan, Valdez. I think in the American League, it's a little more kind of scratch, if that makes sense, or guys that you would have looked in before. And obviously for me, it's something I just don't watch as much American League baseball. But I think none of those. I think Eovaldi is the one guy out of that group that you would kind of be like, oh, like he's having a really, really good year, as opposed to these other guys. Where it's like, yeah, it's Garrett Cole, right? Like. That's kind of the expectation. And I think Eovaldi is one of those guys that talent-wise, even within like in clubhouses and stuff, because he was with us for a little while, it's pretty well known how talented he's always been. And probably become one of my favorite pitchers to watch. Obviously the second Tommy John and kind of having that, but also he reached out to me after. And so, a guy that I'm kind of following a little bit just because you have a little familiarity with him. But obviously any guy that's gone through 2 elbow surgeries, I'm certainly rooting for. And I like this guy's having his career year, and it was better than your standard year. Like he should win the Cy Young that year. You know what I mean?
A specific question on that, because what's so amazing about Eovaldi's, one, his stuff is still great, having undergone 2 Tommy John surgeries, but they're skipping him the next time through the rotation. They said that they were going to do that kind of with a bunch of different guys, and it's just kind of a maintenance thing. But part of the reason why they picked now to do it was that his velocity was a little bit down in the last outing, but he still went 6 shutty against the Tampa Bay Rays, which is extremely impressive. Can you talk a little bit about how difficult it is and how impressive it is to be able to go 6 shutty or just give you a quality start when your stuff is 2 ticks down from what it normally is?
Yeah, I mean, for me, that's kind of been the barrier. And I think the longer that I play, the more I feel like 10 years behind in terms of mentality or like what I am trying to do or what I want to accomplish. Like for me, 6-on-2 is kind of what you should be trying to do, right? Like we talked about all these kind of things that I checklisted, like strike out 1 an inning, you go 6-2. That means if you make 35 or 32 starts, you throw 195 innings, punch out 200 guys, and you have a 3. Like you're kind of in that park or in that ballpark of like what number 1s and 2s in the major leagues look like, right? And so that quality start metric, I think, is a little outdated. I've had some interesting conversations about that. Some starting pitchers that we have played with, Scherzer and I have talked a lot about this. So we think that it should be 6-on-1, 7-on-2, 8-on-2, complete game on 3, or some variation of that. You can make it a little more whatever, but maybe it was 6-on-none, 7-on-1, 8-on-2, 9-on-3.
Okay.
Wow.
That's a high bar.
Yeah, but like I just know my numbers better than I think in 2021 I had 26 or 27 quality starts. Like if I went back and looked, like I wouldn't be proud of 27 of my, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
if it's not something that you feel like you really like asserted your game plan and like were successful and did really good things, and you gave up a run because of X, Y, and Z, then it shouldn't be like super rewarded. And honestly, I don't think the quality start statistic is super rewarded now anyway. So like, let's put it at a bar that makes it rewardable, right?
It was rewarded when Fromber like grabbed the record last year, but I'm with you. And like my long standing, I think it was 25 straight quality starts. I mean, it was crazy. Nuts. Yeah, like he's just an animal. But my long-standing thought has like 6 innings, 3 earned is a pretty, like, I guess, low bar to clear for a quality start. I've always thought kind of 6 innings plus 2 innings or fewer. So I would just lower it by a run.
Yeah.
But that shows that you and Max Scherzer hold yourselves to a very high standard, which I think is good for our listeners to know.
Yeah, well, I think also, I mean, I'm much more like open to like something that makes me feel good about it, right? But like his pride and like he just had so many of like a certain thing that it's like, that's like that's what I'm supposed to do, right? And so I think he kind of pushed me to stretch some of my numbers a little bit. I'd rather hold on to a little of it, but I do think 6-3 is a little. And the reasoning is like if you have a 4.5 ERA for the year, like I don't think you're making many all-star teams. Like if you want to talk quality, that's like it's a different thing. Yeah, quality for a number 5 starter or a 4A, like that's great. But if you're walking out there believing you're a number 1 or 2 or even number 3 starter, and you have a 4 or 5, like. I mean, I went through it last year before I got hurt. I had a 4, and I literally felt like the sky was falling every time I would pitch. Like, and it's just I wasn't going 6 on 2 or 3. Like, it just didn't feel. Those games didn't feel successful to me, and so I think that metric needs to be twisted a little to get to where like starting pitchers feel very successful if they achieve it.
Got you.
I'm just imagining like a grinder average pitcher in the league hearing that Hall of Famer Max Scherzer and All-Star Walker Buehler think the quality start should be harder to get and just being like those assholes.
Well, I mean, like, listen, I don't think anyone wants to like go home and have a 4.5 ERA. Like,
no, I'm with you.
Right?
I'm with you. No,
but
100%.
If you're a grinder guy, like none of the guys you watched growing up had 4.5s either. So like, I don't think the bar should be different because of how close you've been to it. You know what I mean?
No, it's a great point too, because it's funny when you look at a stat line of 6 innings, 3 runs, you're like, oh, like that's a fine start. But then when you map it out to the ERA, it really does give you a totally different perspective on it.
Yeah, and I think that is another reason it's like so unbelievable and like underappreciated how good some of these guys have been in the major leagues, right? Like we were talking before this. Kersh has like a 2.47 for his career. Like 2.25 pace is 4 innings, 1 run. It's like he's basically on 1 run for 4 innings for his entire career almost.
Which is nuts.
That's what's crazy.
That is, yeah.
Yeah, that's insane. Kersh, I'm sure, is one of those guys that jumps out to you in the National League as well. We'll jump over to the NL right now. Our video element today is going to be 2 guys that, may make your immediate list, may not make your immediate list, but I'm sure at least one of them is going to be there. So Kershaw and who else in the National League is really
it's hard. It's hard not to say Snell. I think we're kind of seeing the old Snell a little bit in terms of the velo's kind of crazy. He's really doing the 2-pitch thing. The Steele kid from Chicago has obviously had a really, really good year. He's, I think what's not underappreciated, but what people aren't connecting the dots is he's doing a lot of the same things that Fried does, at least with the fastball. It's not the same velo that Max Fried has, and obviously he's been on the DL for a little bit, but that like arm side straight ball and it cuts more as it comes across is really, really interesting to deal with. We've seen it obviously with Fried throughout the past couple of years, facing them in the playoffs and stuff, but he's just throwing this ball that like it never seems to A, end up where it looks like it's going to, and B, move the same way twice in a row. which from a command element as a guy that I try and throw like a perfectly straight ball. Like, I don't know how that, like, that's a very weird thing for me to watch, which in my head means it's got to be very, very weird to try and hit it. Like, and so if he can kind of master that, I mean, Wade Miley to a different extent with the cutter has done that for a while and been really successful at certain points. It's an interesting technique, but I got to believe that he's done that kind of his whole life, right?
Yeah.
But he's having a great year. Trying to think, another guy we already touched on, Stroman is having kind of one of those, like, he's going to be good every time he goes out year. So, and then obviously the two guys we're going to touch on, but
specific question on Snell. Obviously the whiff numbers are crazy, and he's been much better of late in basically any statistic you look at. But do you think somebody with that kind of stuff, even with that kind of stuff, can succeed walking, 4 or more batters per 9? Like, how much of a handicap is that to a starting pitcher's success? Because even over the last 5 starts where he's been great, he's walking 15% of batters.
Yeah, I mean, how many guys are getting hits, right? Like,
yeah,
the man on first is the man on first. It is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think the expectation when he goes out is that it's going to be 12 pitch innings, right? Like, that's just kind of not how he operates. And so you can give up a hit in 1 pitch and it takes 4 to walk a guy. Like, yeah, that's if you want to be efficient. Like, he's going, I don't want to speak for him, but it seemingly, like, for him, 5 on 0, like 6 on 0 is like what he's trying to do, right? I don't think there's a ton of, I'm going to go throw a complete game today. I know he has before and been very dominant in doing it. But for him, it's all about, like, what level those balls come out of the hand at, right? Like, the closer that he gets that fastball and the slider to come out for a while, it gets tougher and tougher to face. And we've seen him in Tampa. We've seen him in San Diego. And there's days where it's like the heater can't get down and the slider can't get up. And then there's other days where it's like you can't tell, even on TV, really, until very, very late, which one it is. And when you're in that kind of mode, I think he's very tough to deal with.
I know baseball fans in general don't really like watching walks. I know pitchers get really frustrated when they walk guys. But you mentioned, like, the runner on first is the runner on first. Snell attacks pitching in probably a different way than you do, in probably a different way than Sandy does, in a different way than, whoever. How have you ever interacted with a guy that, like, is able to successfully kind of suppress the frustration of walking guys? Because Snell can walk 5 and still go 5 shutout innings. Feel like that can get frustrating for a lot of pitchers.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I think of it in terms of whip, right? So
yeah,
I think one kind of mental anti-frustration technique or calm yourself while you're out there is like the walk. As long as you don't give up a hit, it's the same thing, right? Like, learning that for me, it's like 15 an inning. I walk a guy, like, can I get the double play, cancel it out in my head? Or can I throw less than 3 balls to the next 2 guys? Whatever you have to do to, like, do the mental accounting to make yourself feel good about it, right?
Yeah.
I've always had a really tough time when I'm behind on pitch count, not necessarily walking guys. Like, for me, when I look up, it's the second inning, I'm at like 42 pitches. Like, that frustrates me because that puts a cap on what I can do the rest of the game, especially when I feel good or feel like I'm doing really good things. And then it's like, well, maybe I can only get 5 or 5 1/3 out of this when I had the stuff mentally to go 7, right? Like, that's where it gets frustrating to me. But there's also the risk reward that a lot of guys play is like, listen, I could throw 94 and throw strikes or whatever, or orient my delivery or orient my mix, but I'm going to give up more homers and more hits, and maybe I'll be more efficient, but I'll have a point higher ERA. And it's like, if your best course of action to help your team win is to go and, like, spray really high octane, really good stuff, like that. Sometimes there are people out there that's what they have to do.
Yeah.
And I've been that guy for a year or so, 2 years of my career, where it was very much like, I hope I'm throwing strikes today because I could walk everyone, or it could all be right down the middle and I'll just give up homers. But it's finding that like in between, that seemingly, like even Blake obviously is kind of rolling, and he's found that middle ground, at least for him, whatever those kind of goalposts are for him. He's kind of in the middle, I think.
Have you watched much Jesus Luzardo with the Miami Marlins? And I ask you just because he's coming off of a 13 strikeout performance today, and he's kind of had a roller coaster in his own way of a top prospect, highly regarded, big part of a trade for the Nationals to help win the World Series. And
who was he traded for?
Doolittle. Well, that the first time though from the Nationals.
He's been traded twice, right?
Doolittle and Madsen, and I think it helped win them the World Series. And then when he was with
Oakland, was from who? That was from someone
from Oakland? From the Nationals who drafted him. I forgot
he was ever in Washington.
Yes. So they overslotted him as a high schooler out of Marjorie Stoneman Douglas after Tommy John, and then grabbed him in the third round.
Gave him I didn't even know that.
Yeah, gave him first or second round money. Really looked good when he first came out. Turned heads on the backfields. That was enough for the A's to say, hey, that's who we want in this deal. Nationals went all in. They won the World Series. That's fine. He turned into one of the best pitching prospects in baseball in Oakland. They pitched him in the playoffs out of the bullpen, which I know you have some familiarity with having to deal with that. And I know that wasn't the easiest thing in the world for you. And I think it did kind of stifle his development a little bit as well, because when they threw him back in the rotation, he kind of struggled and really struggled to regain the command. Eventually was flipped for Starling Marte back when the A's were buyers and not, a team that purposely tanked. And
Marte.
And now with the Marlins, he has kind of just kicked things into another level. He's from South Florida, so I'm sure being home is great and everything, but it's just been amazing seeing him turn into the guy that everybody thought he could be. I don't know how much you've watched of him, but I'd love to get some of your thoughts there, because he's quickly turning into one of the better left-handers in baseball if he can maintain this.
Yeah. Was he an all-star this year?
Unfortunately, no. He kind of kicked it in gear a little too late.
He's had a really good run since the break, right?
Yes, exactly.
No, I think he's been one of those guys for a long time. It's like, why is this not working better than it was? Because it's always like come out of his hand really good. You obviously see kind of what he wants to do, and it's like the right things, right? I think of him, and there's a lefty from Anaheim that I think Sandoval's the guy's name.
Yeah, Patrick Sandoval.
But it's kind of like at times you're like, holy, like what lefty's doing? They're just similar to me.
Yeah. And
in the same way where it's like this guy like puts it together, he's going to be really good, and seemingly Luzardo has. And I saw some of the pitches from that game today. It was like the fastballs were touching two corners and everything else was like a ball below. And it's the same thing we're talking about with Snell. It's like the level, right? Like where these pitches are ending up. You get in like these certain tunnels that if you have good stuff, if you have really good stuff like those guys do, like you put them in the right tunnels, it's really hard to deal with.
So that's really what it's about is kind of putting it in the right tunnels.
Yeah, I mean, I think
it used to be a guy that was erratic.
I think that's probably the next step in delivery, right? Like, we all have powerful mechanics if you're going to be throwing 97 and you're going to be a prospect and all of this stuff, right? But finding mechanics and feels that get you into the right tunnels a lot is probably like the second evolution or the third evolution of being like a major league starting pitcher, I think, right? Because like you can get away with being down, like we're talking about with velocity, down 2 miles an hour if everything's in the right tunnel. Like you just can't. Everyone talks about tunneling, but nobody talks about like setting up your mechanics to put your pitches with the right action in the right tunnels, right? Like, it's a whole nother layer to the thing. And you'll see a lot of guys that are 26, 27, 28 years old start really doing that. And I think he's probably even younger than that, which is great.
25.
Yeah. So, but he's not 23 and he's not 22, right? Like it takes some time and it takes some understanding of like, all right, my stuff can come out of my hand great and I can feel great, but I just am throwing way too many fastballs belt high. It's like, yeah, you have to fix your mechanics to then be able to feel the same thing in that ball's, 2 inches above the bottom of the zone a lot. right? And then you start punching out 13 and whatever.
Got you. Really cool. All right, let's jump into the other two guys in the National League that we haven't talked about. And it's the guy that's pacing the league in strikeouts by, I think, 30 at last
Is
check.
he 200 yet? Like, good Lord.
I think he's 189. Strider 189. I think the next best is like 162 or 165, something like that. So he is lighting the world.
Like 350 in his first 40 or something like that.
348 in his first 220 innings or something. Just like 14 Ks per nine. Quadzilla. Right. So if I had to name like two or three guys that I've had the most fun watching this year, I think Gallen would be up there with McClanahan and Valdez. So,
by the way, I want you to run this number for us next week. I want you guys to go and find my best, however many innings Strider has.
Okay.
I want you to see if I have 200 and whatever innings that get to 340 innings total.
They get to 340 punch outs?
Yeah. I want to see if I even have 200 innings. That's a pretty advanced stat there.
Man. Yeah, that might be above my pay grade. Strider.
I think I can dig that. I could definitely dig that.
You know what I'm saying? If I I punch out the side 20 times. So then do I have 182 punch out innings? I doubt it.
Oh, okay. So you're saying like extrapolate the best 200 innings of your career and see if it's better than his.
Yeah, I hope it is, because I would hope I punch out two guys in an inning enough times. Wow. But I bet it's closer than we think.
Okay. We'll take a gander at that. Spencer Strider, 14.6 Ks per nine right now and 116.2. So he's got 189 strikeouts. We're going to jump in with Strider, and then we're going to go to Zach Gallen here. But I plucked this sequence from Thursday, and we were talking about this on the Friday show. So if this sounds familiar to you guys, we're diving in pitch by pitch now with a real all-star pitcher here. But this is
also probably one of the most scary but most fun situations you can be in as a starting pitcher. Now, if this was the first inning, it's a whole different ballgame. It's like you get punched right in the mouth. But man on third, nobody out is about as like the assumption is they're going to score, right? And so if you can get out of this clean, it's about as big a win outside, bases loaded, nobody like as long as somebody's on third base with nobody out, it's about as like, let's just see what we can do.
Yeah. Is it like see how nasty my stuff is today?
It's like there's a freeing thing to it.
Yeah.
You're playing with house money or something.
Yeah.
Well, you're losing with house money already, right?
It's like taking the buzzer beater from like 45 feet out. Like no one's expecting you to hit it, but if you cash it,
if you went to a casino and I handed you $100, you're not going to go bet that on. You're going to go bet that on like a 50-1 shot, and just see what happens, right? Like if you're ever going to get lucky, it's the best to do with somebody else's money.
Okay,
so you're talking to the wrong guy, by the way, because I think Jack would just probably take that and leave. But
I'm out. I'm paying for the Uber with 20 of those bucks, and then I'm pocketing the 80, maybe putting it in like a Roth IRA or something.
We're gonna have to convert you.
I'll get there. So this is Ketel Marte shooting a ball 109 the other way, first pitch of the inning, and this is you're already 3 innings into an ace off. So I'm sure there's that elevated sense of just elevated testosterone levels. Like, hey, Zach Gallen's on the other side. I'm gonna match this dude. So leadoff triple for Ketel Marte. He's seeing Corbin Carroll, who everybody knows is freaking awesome, Christian Walker, and Dominic Canzone, really talented rookie. And I clipped the last 2 pitches from each of these at-bats against these guys. So 1-2 to Carroll. He goes 98 just off the inside black. He follows with 97 elevated to punch him out.
Yeah. So we're talking about tunneling a lot, right? Like, you see the difference in that is like 3 inches left to right, at least. Yeah. That's like an inch off the plate. And this one's like an inch on.
Yeah.
So they're 3 inches different probably with the ball. Like this is like where we're at in Major League Baseball, but you can see how as long as it's on the plate and it's got the ride, like guys are going to swing. And they're so good right to left. And the umpires, as much as I hate to say it, are pretty good right to left. And it's just a big boy heater in a big spot. And hard, like there's two schools of thought, right? There's like the really breaking ball heavy to go for the punch out.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the guys that like have big heaters that try and throw that because that's their swing and miss, right? But for certain guys, whether they're fastball or whatever else they throw as their swing and miss pitch, like if you got a swing and miss fastball, it's still a swing and miss pitch. So I feel that sometimes when you throw breaking balls in those situations, like that time, like especially like a curveball, like people have time to consciously, I don't think they really do it, but they make a choice to like just touch it.
Gotcha.
Like I've seen so many guys throw breaking balls in that spot, and it's like the guy takes a horrible swing and just like drags it to first base and scores the run, right? As opposed to what he did here, it's like it's now, like hit it or not. And so obviously he made the right choice there, but hard to do. I mean, that's a hard pitch to pull, like to all right, let's go. I've just thrown you one. You've just seen it. It was almost perfect. You took it. And then to like go a little bit more on the plate is pretty wild.
Yeah. Jumping to Christian Walker here. He then follows with 99 up and in on 2-2. And on 3-2, he throws ball 4, but that is a disgusting slider.
I think what we're talking about, the freedom, right, of having him in on third. Your 2-2, I don't know what he did before these, right? But that 2-2 is to set up that slider. Like the intent is to throw that slider on 3-2. Like I imagine if you had a microphone between the catcher and the pitcher, the intent of all of that is I think I got someone at the front door. The intent of that 2-2 pitch is for it to be a ball. Right, like neither of them wanted that 2-2 to be a strike.
Yeah,
because you're playing the odds of we think we can throw this slider, and so they set it up as good as they could, and to have kind of the nuts to do that on 2-2 and then go 3-2 sliders, it's pretty strong.
When you're in that spot too, obviously you got to be working with your catcher. There's a lot of trust with your catcher, and it depends on the circumstance, but when your backstop calls for a 3-2 breaking ball, like if you're in that spot, you talked about how that kind of takes some gonads there. Where would you be at as a pitcher? Like how would you have sequenced from 2-2 onward there if you were in that exact spot?
Yeah, so I mean, you're talking right on right, really good slider, really good heater, and I think with Christian, that's just kind of what you're trying to do. Obviously, fastballs out over and sliders that aren't balls. He seems to kind of hammer, and especially he's having a pretty good year, I think, and hitting clean up for a pretty good team. So I think you miss with that heater, or he probably dotted that heater for what he mentally was trying to do, and then throws a really good slider. If he takes that pitch, your first and third one out, you're probably no worse for the wear in terms of positioning and mental like chess that you're trying to play. You're in a decent spot. You can get a double play ball. You can have like the corners in and get that weird kind of check the guy, throw to second, check the guy, throw to whatever. Like there's a lot of ways that teams can play that. But I think the pitch clock is a weird element of this because for me, I'm running through all these scenarios on 2-2.
Yeah.
Right. Like I want to go heater. All right. If I'm going to try and punch him, I'm going to go up in here. Maybe I get him there. I have a chance to get him there if I make it perfect, but I'm going to miss. I'm going to err on the side of ball to then go slider because then this next guy, I know I can throw this pitch on. Oh, he's aggressive. If I throw a cutter, maybe I get a ground ball and we get the double play. Like so all that's happening. Okay. All that's happening while I'm standing there trying to decide what I want to throw on 2-2.
Sorry, I was about to say, I don't want to stray us from the point, but I am genuinely curious. Do you think they should relax the pitch clock restrictions in the postseason for this exact kind of reason?
I think they need to have a conversation with the umpires. I think it needs to be very clear cut. I don't think it needs to be different numbers. I think everyone's kind of played in this thing, but when you're talking within 3 runs after the 6th inning and a guy's like coming set as it goes down, let's relax. The guy's touching the plate and moving his head when it hits 8. Like if the pitcher's not set at 8 and he's nodding and the guy's not looking at him, but he's like in there and ready. Like, I think we can relax it on the interpretation. I don't think the rules necessarily need to change. Now, if they said it was 20 and 24, 20 and 25, and it was hard, like they've been kind of calling it now, great, all good. But that involves a whole new, you got to redo the clocks and do all, like, just tell everyone to relax it by a second. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because everyone's used to this target number so far. Yep. And again, I haven't done it, so I'm kind of literally layman on it, but that would kind of be my guess.
To be fair,
I saw an athletic article about the potentially saying like 3 at-bats of a thing, you just call the clock off.
Yeah.
Which isn't horrible. I get the context of it, but it's like the review thing. Like, what are you going to save them?
Yeah.
Who's on the mound? Does a ball really matter? It's 0-2. I took too long. Now it's 1-2. Now I don't waste a pitch. Maybe I just throw, like, when do you take those? You know,
to be fair,
there's a clear cut. You wait till the one guy that really struggles on your team with pitch clock does it, but he's probably adjusted now. Like, I don't know.
I was saying, to be fair, the NFL, like, there'd be way more delay of games if they really called it when it was supposed to be called. There's a lot of clock hits 0, snap gets off, and we just let it roll. Like, I agree, there could be a similar kind of grace second there.
Yeah, maybe you have we have the challenges, right? Maybe you have a 2 or 3 per team allotment before it's the penalty, or
you like call timeout basically,
or you can take the penalty and then later in the game you can throw a flag that, not a flag, but say like, no, we're good. That's one of our 3. Like, we get 3 pitch clock violations a game in the playoffs that we choose when they don't count.
I like that idea.
I think that's better than turning the clock off.
For sure. For sure. Because we've seen the clips, like we've seen what happened in spring training versus like certain postseason ABs, and you can get through an entire half inning before, like a 4-pitch sequence being over. So I'm with you. Just to wrap up here on Strider real quick, he sees Dominic Canzone here. So he's got, 2 punch outs. You go 99 up and away to a rookie. Welcome to the show. And then a slider. And obviously he's fired up. How can you not be?
Yeah, same tunnel he just threw to Walker, which is, I don't know the report on this Canzone kid yet. I haven't obviously pitched against him. But when I was talking to somebody at the field yesterday about if you can get me into a rhythm of, even if it's righties and lefties, if I can throw pitches in the same areas, pitches in the same areas, from a lineup construction perspective, right? Yeah. So I don't know if they have he's fastball up in, slider away. I think it's pretty well known. Like, if this guy's fastball up away, slider under, like, you're almost doing yourself a disservice by letting that guy have 2 straight at bats where he's firing the same pitches at the same spots.
Got you. And then and then we jump to Gallen to wrap. We'll talk about how this game kind of ended after we ripped through Gallen, but this is I chose just a 3-pitch punch out of Eddie Rosario here because Gallen kind of showcased all 3 pitches that were working in this one.
I can't believe you guys picked Rosario again. We've been through this.
Yeah. That's on me. I got to be better. I'm sorry. I hope
I would think I would garner a little respect.
This is Eddie, and this is, knuckle curve outside. Gallen then goes cutter inside. And then he elevates a heater, and Rosario at 93, 94, blown by upstairs. So this is just like, is it here are my 3 best? Try and do anything with it?
Yeah, I mean, at least in my remembering of Rosario, that's kind of the plan. When I really faced him, he was probably the best hitter on the planet. We just kind of haven't seen guys get hot like this, but this is the plan to him. It's like break them all away or break them all under, cutter, heater up, and obviously I threw him a million cutters and he hit one about 400 feet, but we won't revisit that. I think for me, Gallen is one of my favorite guys to watch because he and I are as similar stuff wise, I think, as anyone that I have for kind of reference. in terms, his changeup's probably a little better, but I throw like a real slider where he has his cutter and kind of not as much of a slider.
Yeah.
But you can see where we stand, right? This is kind of a weird thing. So go to just where he stands on the mound. So think about him. He's got a changeup. Say he and I have the same stuff. Little curveball, fastball that's kind of jump cut a little bit, and a pretty good cutter. So he has changeup, which moves this way.
Yeah.
I have slider, which moves this way. So I'm going to be better against right-handed hitters just on the stuff than he is. He's going to be better on lefties because he can do this.
Got you.
So he moves to the right to hide the ball from righties. I'm on the first base side to hide the ball from lefties.
Huh.
Cool.
Because he can make it, he can throw a changeup that's harder. It's a harder pitch for lefties to hit.
Yeah.
I can throw a slider, harder pitch for righties to hit. So if our numbers are all equal, maybe he's a little better on lefties, I'm a little better on righties, and so we set up on the mound to counteract those.
Gotcha.
Isn't that kind of wild?
That's really wild. I've never thought about it like that. Huh.
Yeah, so does mound setup, like where you set up relative to the rubber, make that much of a difference? I know Brandon Fott of the Diamondbacks.
Think about how much more right to left. So from where he's – show me this cutter again.
Yeah, cutter was on 0-1.
So pause it when he releases it. Look at how far left that ball goes to get there, right?
Yeah.
So it comes across the plate.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
My cutter that starts there, my hand's going to be almost in the middle of the – my cutter that ends up there is going to start almost in the middle of the plate from this view because I'm all the way over on the left.
So it would be starting about right here.
Yeah.
And ending
I'm
up
throwing it where it goes out to in, and he's just throwing it in because of the angle. So everything's like relative to that angle, especially when we're both kind of extreme. Now, if everybody's in the middle, it is what it is. But I'm as far left as I can possibly go. I have like toes on the rubber.
Got you.
He's like way over there and pushing to the right. You can see on the rubber where his drag is.
Yeah.
He's like pushing out there too. Look how far to the right his arm is. Mine's like right down the middle of the fucking plate.
Yeah. Huh.
But it's the same mix. It's just we're doing it from different angles.
That's really cool. Walker Buehler and Zach Gallen a little bit more similar than we initially anticipated.
Boys, we haven't talked about the nectar yet, by the way.
I know.
What do you guys got going? We're waiting on packages. We're in a little – it's been hard to find everything we wanted to find, which is fantastic for bourbon.
Yes.
What I will tell you is this is in the Buffalo Trace hood or whatever you want to – Sazerac hood. It's probably my second favorite bourbon in the game.
Okay.
Behind Weller 12, which is a special one, difficult to find. If you guys find it for retail, buy all of them you can.
Okay.
And I'll buy them from you. But
Good to know.
That's crazy. That reminds me of like sports cards.
Yeah.
yes, that's what it is.
We'll upcharge you for sure.
Blanton's, which has the notorious top of the little horse. Do you know the kind of secret insider info on the Blanton's bottle?
Of course.
I know there's a horse on top. That's it.
Okay. So on every bottle of Blanton's, there's the horse, and then you see behind the hoof there's a B.
Yes.
Okay. So there are B bottles, there are L bottles, there are A bottles, N and T, O, and S. So N is twice. So the big thing is if you drink enough bourbon, you will save them and have Blanton's spelled out.
Okay. So this is
and the cool thing is they're all in a different pose. So the B's are in a different pose than the L's. And if you lay them all out, they kind of like a real horse race.
So I was the weird kid growing up that had the map that you would put the quarters from all 50 states into. This is like
listen, I did the same thing and I was a kid. You were a teenager.
Whatever, man. damn, that's way cooler. That's like 100 times cooler, and it's like an actual adult hobby. So, do you have all of them? Have you hit the holy trinity of lanterns?
Yeah, so we had the barrel of it for our wedding, so I've kind of plucked certain ones to make sure I had it. My dad also got us. You can go and buy. You can cheat the system, right? You can go and buy. They have like a set that you can buy.
Damn. What's the fun?
Yeah, it's a pretty cool. I mean, it's not an Illuminati thing, but it feels a little secret society, you know?
Yeah, for sure. And it's good to know that you're part of it.
Yeah, it's like, you know.
You just outed yourself, basically, yeah.
Well, no, I'm not involved. I mean, maybe in the Buffalo Trace, a naughty, you know.
Yeah. That's good. That was a good abbreviation. I like that. All right, we've already kept you too long, man. North of an hour. I think this was the first one over an hour, but appreciate you sticking around. Thanks for showing off the nectar. And yeah, if we do get this shipment, I think we're getting this shipment this week. If we do get it, you'll repeat Blanton's next week. Cool.
Yeah, I'm down for that. Also, announcement for everyone: we got new merch coming. Possibly, we talked about.
Yes.
Yeah. My buddies over at Red Vanley are going to hop in. I'm very, very excited. It's probably my favorite golf athleisure brand. I'm pumped up.
It's exciting stuff. We're going to have some quality.
I'm going to design a couple myself, I think. I don't know if they'll sell, but I'm going to try and do some stuff.
I'm so in on that. I want to see whatever you sketch up, and we'll just put it on the market and see what happens.
Stick figures.
Yeah, I think it'd be a fair field test.
Yeah. Got to be some stick figures involved. All right. Walker Bueller, you're awesome. We'll talk to you next week.
All right, brother. See you.